Now the 20th century, a time of discipline, structure, and surely the best education system. Writing lines, reciting formulas, and obeying the teacher. Education is at its finest.
Now wait, we aren't in the 20th century anymore, so why, I ask, does it still look like this? Now for centuries, education has been more about drilling facts into the minds of students rather than about actual learning. And this is called rote learning, where students are commonly found memorizing content for tests and quizzes just to forget it immediately after. There is no information retention at all. No better example can be found than in STEM education. It's portrayed as prestigious, and yet classrooms around the globe seem intent on emulating its archaic past. Rote learning seems to be working, but in reality, rote learning has and will continue to fail both society and students. This teaching style wasn't built to create thinkers, but rather workers. Now, rote learning originated in the 17th century when nation-states across Europe sought to create loyal subjects by assimilating them with common teachings such as language and religion. As the Industrial Revolution then rolled around, rote learning shifted, preferring a more capitalistic approach, all the while still maintaining its controlling roots. Now in this time period, the economies of countries relied on workers, people who needed the bare minimum level of education to programmatically obey factory instructions. Rote learning became the most efficient way to train these workers, to train them that direct recall supersedes creativity. After all, thinking was useless in factory work, impeding the efficiency of the overall system. In particular, educators created a one-way flow of information with no available counterplay. Like pigs in a sty, students gorge on information dictated towards them with no afterthought whatsoever. And the result of all this? Schools churned out gears, all oiled up and ready to go, perfectly fitting into the overall clockwork. The issue is that, while the world has evolved around us, this method of education has not. Modern education still parallels the past, where individual achievement is prioritized over collaboration and problem solving. Now, this certainly isn't the norm in the real world. Like, when's the last time you had to do something with no external help whatsoever? Like fixing a toilet or a sink. Rote learning, where you forsake ingenuity in favor of brute memorization, is archaic. But what does this exactly implicate for current society? Now, in the past century, the world has seen monumental new changes in technology. From the discovery of radioactivity to the invention of the iPhone. What unites all of these scientific breakthroughs isn't the amount of money poured in or the country of origin, but rather the sheer number of failed attempts and the ingenuity of everyone taking part in the project. These geniuses, Curie and Jobs, they didn't start out with the right answer. Curie didn't find the key to radioactivity on the first try, and nor did Jobs with his first prototype of the iPhone. Their brilliance came from the journey towards the answer, and not the answer itself. They stumbled and flailed towards the finish line like salmon swimming upstream to their spawning ground, fighting against crushing currents with determination and grit until they could finally celebrate with joy. Yippee! Now, students enrolling in these courses seem to wish for the same adrenaline rush that these fields seem to provide through their countless potential groundbreaking discoveries. And they're left sorely disappointed, because what do we find in these classrooms? Teaching from slideshows, textbooks, and handouts. In other words, rote learning strikes again. Rather than allowing students to express their curiosity and creativity, the system stifles that. While teachers regurgitate answers, the student is asked to parrot back. There is no processing on information, no chewing on it and mulling it over, just straight into the mouth and then straight back out. Now, where do we see that? Ah yes, the factories and the gorging on information. Now, don't get me wrong, rote education is still useful in some contexts, especially for learning rudimentary concepts. Things like learning phonics when you're learning English for the first time, or maybe some basic processes in biology. But the key here is that you cannot overdo it for every single STEM course. When you're spitting out facts without end through all facets of STEM education, that is what runs counter to innovation. After all, Groundbreaking discoveries don't come from memorized facts, especially if you're the one in the fray championing a new breakthrough. Success stems from failure, from risk-taking, and from problem-solving. But today, students are becoming increasingly conditioned to avoid these precursors of success, growing increasingly unaccustomed to taking risks. They're told that failure is the end of the line, with no prospect for their future at all anymore. Innovators are punished and Pavloved with low grades, scaring them from ever daring to think again. Nowadays, students come to value certainty over curiosity, since rote learning has inherently stomped out the spirit of innovation. It's no wonder that some of the greatest innovators of the 21st century dropped out of schooling. We have Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, and Mark Zuckerberg. They weren't people who lacked the brain to finish post-secondary, but rather they lacked the patience to endure an environment that was the only obstacle towards their vision. Hindered by rote learning, they broke free. For every one innovator, thousands more are extinguished. With this way of teaching, the globe faces an unprecedented issue, where the next generation of innovators are killed before they even have a chance to be born. Very clearly, this is a very bleak outcome. So how do we fix this? How should schools rebuild education? Let's start simple. Let's say we have a physics class, and the lesson of the day is Millikan's oil drop experiment. Now, for brief context, this was designed to measure the charge of a single electron by using electric forces to levitate a little oil droplet. In a traditional rote learning environment, the teacher would read out the experiment details while students passively copied it down. But let's change it up a bit. Instead of directly feeding the information to the students, the teacher could rephrase it as a question. Based on what we know about the forces involved, how might we be able to find the charge of the electron? And boom! The dynamic of the classroom shifts entirely, from passive to active. Students are engaged. It tugs at their brain, sparking curiosity. But the lesson itself doesn't matter here. What does matter is the transformation of a stagnant to dynamic classroom. Rote learning in this instance was successfully defeated through just the simple reframing of one lesson. Now, this is exactly what inquiry-based learning attempts to address, shifting school from what is the answer to how do we get to the answer. Students are able to conduct their own exploration of the topic, to solve the problem, and to thereby develop deeper understanding. All the while, teachers shift from lecturers to facilitators, merely guiding the classroom if need be. Along the way, there are sure to be roadblocks and bumps, but that's all part of learning. Once again, success only stems from failure. Now take, for example, the McMaster Health Sciences Department, which has been using inquiry-based education since the 2000s. External reviews of the program have concluded that there was ample evidence of application of conceptual knowledge, and that the skills imbued in the program, such as formulating researchable questions and critical thinking skills, would serve the student well. The reviews also found that students were well prepared for intensive real-world scenarios and problems, and that student attrition of the health sci program was the lowest of all departments within McMaster. These are all very clear markers that the inquiry-based learning is operating at a higher level than rote education. So now, the choice for educators is simple. We can either emulate our flawed past, subjugating and controlling our students, or we can birth the next generation of innovators. It seems extraordinarily clear to me what the real solution is.